Honkai Star Rail released a few days ago, and after 35 hours I basically finished what's available until next patch while enjoying daily progress and clawing my way up the 2 endgame modes, so now is a good time to start making videos. This is a quick look at how fighting works in this game, nothing advanced, just basic stuff for players who are getting into it or haven't started yet. We'll talk about things to know before a fight, during a fight, and after a fight. Let's begin. Before combat, it's your time to prepare, on both the macro and micro levels. You can level up and swap characters, gear, and skills, apply buffs to yourself, and decide how to engage an enemy. You can see info about what enemies in front of you and decide whether to fight or not. Single enemies wandering the world represent a group, and a group of enemies won't fight you as soon as you step in their line of sight. You get some time to react, since there is a detection meter that fills as you get close and they keep looking at you. Once filled, it'll change to an exclamation mark and they'll chase you, trying to hit you. If you don't want to fight them or you weren't ready, you can run away and they'll eventually reach their tether range, resetting to where they were before and just running back to their original location. Also, using the camo paint craftable item will reduce enemy detection rate by a lot, so keep that in mind. Fights can start with advantage for you or the enemy. If you do let their attack hit you, you'll be ambushed and they attack before you. But if you hit them with your attack or technique, you typically attack first, and if that hit matches a weakness in that group, you'll begin the fight with some enemies already broken. This is what you always want to do every time. While looking at an enemy, this bar shows the group's weaknesses, but you can press it to see which elements will break which exact enemies. This helps begin combat with more enemies broken at once, by attacking them with an element that will affect more of the entire group's gauges in that opening hit. Here's a common example of this that might help you understand it a little better. I may be tempted to hit this enemy with Serval because I see its lightning weakness glowing up top, but if I inspect it, I see only one in the group is lightning weak, while both enemies can be staggered by physical. In this case, it's better to engage with physical because it'll break more gauges at once. You can't always do this though. Fights against domain enemies like the ones in calyxes or caverns will always be entered in neutral state, since enemies don't exist on the overworld map, you just enter the battle from a menu. Stagnant shadows are the exception to this, because these do spawn an elite enemy into the world, and you can then attack it to exploit a weakness as usual. Buffs are helpful effects consumed on entering combat, and don't last beyond a single fight. These come in the form of items and techniques. Item buffs are when you consume a food or crafted item to boost the effect of something, like your attack or defense. You can have several items applied at once, but only if they're of different types. So you can have one buff with a shield icon and one buff with a sword icon, but if you try to then apply another sword icon buff, the game tells you this would replace your first offensive buff and make it go away. Note that you can't use items in certain parts of the game, but for most world exploration, main story stuff, and farming, there are no restrictions. Technique buffs consume tech points to use, which are displayed in this purple gauge in the bottom right. Techniques are your out of combat skill button. Not every character's technique is a buff either. Some are engage skills, and if you use them against empty space, you'll just waste a tech point. You can check what a character's technique does by inspecting their skills in the character menu. Once you have buffs applied, pressing this button in the top right will let you see which ones are active, letting you scroll through item and technique buffs for each character. Engage techniques are offensive actions applied to an enemy that give you a bigger advantage than normal attacks do, guaranteeing freeze on an enemy with March 7th or shocking foes with Serval, for example. Some techniques don't fit into either category, but are either still applied to self or applied to enemy. Physical Trailblazer's Finger Snap heals their party, and Sampo's Stun Grenade blinds an enemy for 10 full seconds, completely preventing them from detecting you and delaying their entire group's actions when you fight them. Tech points don't refill on their own. The most common way you'll get more is by breaking objects with purple energy in them. They look different in every region, but if you see something with purple energy in it, breaking it will always restore 2 TP. I won't break these unless I'm missing at least 2 from my gauge, just so I don't waste any of the point refill. You can also restore tech points by eating certain food, like trick snacks, that are craftable with basic materials. So what should we know when we actually do start fighting? Combat in Star Rail is turn-based, with characters and enemies attacking one after the other, according to the turn order on the left side of the screen. Entities at the top are acting now, entities closer to the bottom are acting later. This order can be influenced, and some characters have creative methods to cheat or ignore the turn system, but all combat is generally bound by this flow of time. The speed stat defines how often a unit can act. If you long press or hold down an actions button instead of tapping it, you can smoothly inspect what it does with a card pop-up, like this. This is nice in case you want a reminder of what something does, or you're trying a friend support character in a fight and don't know what their skills do. Just like before, you can use an enemy's information bar to inspect them, look at resistance and weakness, or read their skills. Especially when you're fighting an enemy or a boss for the first time, understanding enemy skills like this really matters to help you form a strategy instead of just fighting with nothing in mind. So how do you actually fight properly? Well, enemies have red health and white toughness. While depleting the red bar is the only way to kill a foe, depleting toughness is what you'll mostly be focusing on. When an enemy is targeted by an element they're weak to, that element will glow above them. Enemies hit by elements they're weak to take more damage and lose some toughness. When that bar hits 0, an enemy will be broken. You know your attack will do this if their white bar is shattering while you're aiming at them. Breaking an enemy deals a chunk of damage to their actual health, and that enemy is stunned, unable to fight until they recover. Broken enemies take more damage from all sources too, I think it's 10%, so now is a good time to hit them with everything you got. When you break an enemy, they also suffer a damage over time on them based on what element you broke them with. This damage will happen when the enemy recovers and regains toughness. So if a foe has low health after being broken, you can often ignore them. They'll recover into their own death due to having a dot on them, but it takes some practice and playing the game for a little while to feel out when you can stop investing damage into a broken foe and still have them die. Skills are a character's stronger secondary action, and they cost skill points to cast. You start each fight with 3 skill points, and basic attacks generate 1, while skills take 1. Skill points are displayed in the bottom right and are shared across your whole party, so basic attacking with one character puts a skill point into the pool, and other characters can then use it. Already it's obvious that a big part of team composition in this game is building a party whose SP generation and SP cost matches up, with enough characters basic attacking to feed the skilling characters the resources they need. Usually attack skills will do more damage than a basic attack too, to health but especially to toughness. So Danhong's basic attack won't break this enemy, but his skill will, and I know this because I see its gauge shattering when targeted with his skill. Breaking gauges keeps you safer, it gives you more actions, and it delays the enemy's actions, essentially giving you more turns. Fundamentally, Star Rail combat is about breaking this gauge more than anything else, and using your skills to break enemies faster or at the right times is often worth it. Ultimates charge by doing actions or taking damage, and these can be cast whenever you want, literally, even when it's not your turn. These don't cost anything and don't even cost a turn. They're an instant cast, flash action you can use as long as it's charged. If an action is already happening, casting an ultimate will make that ultimate fire off as soon as that action is done. So you can't really use them to interrupt something that's already happening, but you can slip them in between things. And this also means using them during a buff duration along with follow-up attacks has no penalty and won't make your buff run out any faster. Shoutouts to my friend Lynn for pointing out this nuance. You can use ultimates to act outside of the normal turn order or cause extra damage to an enemy that's almost broken or dead. Tacking them onto the end of a basic attack or skill is something I do a lot. In content where doing extra damage without consuming a turn matters, ultimates help especially. A small note I want to make about why playing on a controller might be the best input method for Star Rail: holding the left trigger to access your ultimates will actually freeze time during both your action or an enemy's action, which is something I don't think keyboard or touchscreen can do. If this time to think matters to you, then consider playing with a controller. Follow-up attacks are any passively launched attack that happens once you meet a trigger condition. The 2 easiest examples to think of are March 7th Retaliate whenever someone hits a shielded ally on her team, and Herda hitting all enemies within AoE when one is brought under half health. Follow-up attacks also act outside of the turn order, so activating them a lot is a great way to maximize the value of your turns. A small but very important note on tanking and character position. If you have characters who draw aggro, like a tank, or you'll be using mechanics that draw aggro onto a character like March's Shield, try to make sure that character is on the very left or right of your formation, not in the middle, or that one of the characters standing beside them is another tank. The reason why is that some enemies have attacks that cause splash damage to both units next to the one they hit, so if your tank is in the middle of your party, that splash will hit 3 characters instead of just 2. If they're at the edge, an AoE targeted at them will only hit them and one other. Much better, much easier to sustain through. Keep your tanks on the very left or very right. You can toggle battle speed between normal and faster with this button in the top right. Once you've seen characters or enemies' animations a few times, or if you just want to get through fights quicker without doing so much waiting around, this can be a good option to turn on. People who are farming for long sessions probably just have this on permanently. There's also an auto battle button next to it, which I don't use, but it can be useful for AFK farming or a fun optimization challenge to build a team that can auto hard content and still win, like in Azel's SimUniverse World 6 auto battle video. So, you finished a fight. What now? Well, when a fight is over, your rewards will be in the middle of the screen where you can click on and inspect each one if you didn't fight an overruled enemy. If it was an overworld fight, the drops you got will stack up on the left before disappearing. Often, if you're farming for materials that world enemies drop, like Thief's Instinct and the like, this is where you want your eyes to go after you finish a fight. If you've lost health after the fight, you can run by a space anchor, which are the fast travel points in the game, to quickly refill your health to full. Space anchors do have a limit of how much they can heal, but you won't hit that limit these days, so don't worry about it for now. If there's no space anchor nearby and you still need healing, eat healing food from your inventory. Just be careful not to overdo it because characters will eventually become full and won't be able to eat anymore for a while. Since the fight is finished, that means your buffs will now be gone too. You can take this time to reapply them if you want, and consider refilling up on tech points too, either by shattering containers of purple energy or eating an item that gives some, like trick snacks. With this, all you really have left to do is move on to the next fight or next objective. On the way to it, you might see breakable objects. Shattering these with a basic attack is never a bad idea, since they'll drop small amounts of credits and basic materials, which over time will add up. Breakable objects respawn daily, so when you see them, destroy them. That should have given you a quick look at how combat and the gameplay surrounding it on both sides before and after tend to play out in Honkai Star Rail. Apart from minor puzzles, some exploration, and of course experiencing the main story and side quests, combat is most of what you'll be doing, so it's worth being curious and learning as much as you can while you play. It's only going to make your experience more satisfying. I hope this video gave you a good idea of the general concepts at play here. Thank you for watching, may fog shroud you, may stars light your way, and may the night keep you safe.